I want to thank you all for coming. I'm Monica Reyes, Director of Back Gallery Project. We're here for the talk of Holly Armishaw and Miret Rodriguez. Miret has just recently moved back from Paris, where she has worked as a cultural planner, art consultant, and independent curator. In 2017, Miret was selected out of 20 finalists to curate a group show of 90 artists in Nuremberg, Germany, and has also curated the Art House Tulum residency in Mexico. She has a BA in art history from UBC and a master's degree specialized in cultural business administration and management from MECIC Paris. Holly is a Vancouver-based multimedia artist. Her work has been exhibited and published extensively throughout Canada, the US, France, and Brazil. Holly holds a BFA in photography from Emily Carr University and continues her diverse research and education as an integral part of her practice. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you for having us. Thank you. Good morning to everyone, or good afternoon already. So, yes, as Monica mentioned, Holly and I, we met about a year ago in Paris. Is that right? A year and a half ago? Can everybody hear us okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I actually reached out to her. I knew about her work, and I knew she was in Paris, so I couldn't miss the opportunity to ask for a portfolio review. And I believe you had these texts with you.
It was the only thing that I could pack onto a plane and keep contact.
Yeah, and so it was just really interesting to have Holly there and express her passion for French culture, and especially in Paris. So could you tell us a little bit more about this love that you have for the French culture?
I first started visiting France about 18 years ago. I had just completed my fine arts degree, so of course I knew a lot about France through art history studies, but there's really nothing like being there in person and getting to explore everything that you've been learning. So I wasn't just interested in the historical art, but also the contemporary art. And there in Paris, I found the most amazing, incredible art centers, the Pompidou. Now we've got the Palais de Tokyo. And they're showing art from an international and very diverse background. And that's something that we don't quite match up to here in Vancouver. My love of architecture there, and also just feeling like my roots were somewhere back there in Western Europe. I think each of us sort of has a longing to return to our homeland. And let's face it, unless you're First Nations, Canada is not really your homeland. So I do feel at home there. I'd love to move to France. I really love the diversity of culture, the language, but also finding this intellectual treasure trove. Every time I go, I find new things to discover, whether it's the history of Paris itself and the Knights Templar, or the French Revolution, the monarchy, the ancient Roman ruins. At one time I even found tunnels underneath the apartment that I was renting, and those tunnels lead through, is it 200 kilometers or miles through Paris? Kilometers. So they've got all kinds of interesting places under the older neighborhoods, and some of those tunnels were used for things like presumably the Knights Templar escaping on Friday the 13th, the day when they were burned at the stake, but also during times like World War II, when those that were helping the Jewish community would point them to those tunnels to escape the Nazis during that period of persecution.
And these really passionate talks that we can all engage with Holly about is what her and I spoke about the first time we met. And one of the things that always comes back to when you speak to Holly is the Enlightenment era, also known as the Age of Reason. So we know that this period in French history created a breeding environment for the French Revolution, which is a core element in Holly's work. So Holly, can you explain this particular fascination with French, this period of French history, the Enlightenment era leading into the French Revolution?
So I became actually more interested in the French Revolution before the Enlightenment era, but one cannot study one without studying the other. The Revolution was, of course, an effect, with the Enlightenment era being the cause. So what was happening was, I guess what they call a brotherhood, developing throughout Europe and spreading ideologies of reason above things like faith. So it was a questioning period for the Catholic Church and the monarchy. And for me as an atheist, that really resounded, because if you don't have the say the Catholic Church sort of dictating for you, you're sort of free to explore a lot more and make more sense out of the world you're living. You're not just leading a life of blind faith. And I think it certainly also challenges the idea of the monarch as a divine ruler. I think that they probably would not have gotten rid of the French monarchy if they had wanted to get rid of religion and segregation between the church and state as well.
Right, and also during the Enlightenment era, the status of women was not considered to be as that equal to men. So the representation of women during the representation in art of women during this period, they were actually depicted as the antithesis of these values. Artists, writers of women, they were repressed, with a few exceptions, maybe like Versailles. But still, her painting was about depicting scenes of motherhood. At the same time, as we mentioned, the predominant Catholic religion is stating that all men are created equal. So all this kind of context, can you also illustrate with the work that we see here, how you respond to this revision of this historical period with your artwork?
Okay, so maybe a good starting point is this wall of work, which I call How I Became a Feminist by reading Nietzsche. And when I was in my late teens, I was really inspired by the writings of Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, and Freud. And they also influenced Darwin. All of that comes from Schopenhauer, and his talk about things like biological determination and wanting to having this sort of innate desire to procreate that's coming really out of our own bodies. It's just in our nature, and these genius male philosophers thought that if they could overcome that will, the will to procreate, the will to have to worry about feeding and raising a family and that sort of thing, they could put their minds to much better things, such as pursuing philosophy, art, music, basically creating a higher level of mankind. And of course, all of their writings reflect that, because they do speak about man in all of those topics. So what I've done in these works is I've taken all of the male signifiers in quoting them, and I've changed them to their feminine counterparts. So a piece like this that reads, "The true sense of tragedy is the deeper insight that it is not her own sins that the heroine atones for, but original sin, the crime of existence itself." So that really shows the atheistic interest that I have, and describes it quite well. The idea that women have been sort of sentenced to several generations of life sentences for the original sin in the Garden of Eden, and I wonder how much longer must we serve this sentence.
Right, and as you mentioned, you're replacing the gender in these texts, and it's really interesting to look at this period because women were actually considered as passive citizens. At this time and point, we write the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizens, and women are per se excluded from this. And during the French Revolution, women take advantage of this movement to demand equal rights and ultimately end male domination. So your work also is entwined with these feminist values that are being born during this time. Can you also illustrate that with your work? Thinking, well, I mean, notably perhaps the text that you have in the back of people's novel as well.
Sure. Yeah. So this, and also my Marie Antoinette series, which I think a lot of you will know, those are my first sort of encounters with feminist revisionism. And in the summer when I met Miret, I had actually gone to Paris to do research and take photos of the heroines of the French Revolution. And it turns out they're quite invisible. There's very little to photograph. I had already produced this work, started producing different editions of it. And this is stemming out of the French Revolution, and the English equivalent would be liberty, equality, sisterhood. The French national motto that still exists today is liberty, equality, brotherhood. Now that might make you think of Freemasonry and the Illuminati, but also the brotherhood that still exists in many men's clubs today, as far as official men's clubs or boys' clubs such as the White House. Nothing, a lot has changed, but a lot still has yet to change. So I found it really interesting when I started researching who were the most prominent women playing essential roles in the French Revolution. And one of the most interesting women I came across was Madame Olympe de Gouges. And she had actually taken the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, and she had done a feminist revision on it to include women, which I thought was really interesting. Feminist revisionism is a term that isn't even defined in Wikipedia yet, and she was doing it 250 years ago.
The name of the lady?
Olympe de Gouges. Olympe.
And the last name?
De Gouges. Gouges.
De Gouges.
And there's a reference to it there in my stack of books. Those books are all sort of part of the inspiration of this show, and I couldn't find any English biography on her, so I combed every bookstore in France I could, or in Paris, and I finally found a French copy of her biography, and I've been translating it into English, which is a bit of a feat for me because my French is not great, but I think it's a great challenge, and also a way for me to share my findings with an English audience, because she's so important that there's been rallies and protests trying to get her consecrated in the Pantheon. She was that pivotal. She was actually an abolitionist as well. She was writing plays about the abolition of slavery in the French and British colonies. She was a humanist and a feminist, and all of these were way ahead of her time. So of course she was guillotined for what she was doing. And she was a large protester too, so she'd make posters and pamphlets and she'd pass them out. And that kind of speaks to what we're doing today with the women's marches and the movements, where we're using our voices, we're using our words, we're trying to get active. And so these are the posters I used in the last Women's March here in Vancouver. And I like to think that they're partly inspired by the work that she and the other women of the French Revolution did.
Right, because so far we've been speaking about work that dates over 3 centuries ago, right? So where do you think we are now? Like, how fast do you think this movement of women's equal rights have been moving forward, and how do you reflect that with your work? Because we have seen a progression of your work being more detached from yourself and more political.
Definitely.
How do you respond to that?
Definitely the Trump era has had a profound effect on my work. It's made my work less personal and more political. Probably when I started my career as an artist and talking about my personal experiences as a woman, I was thinking in terms of the second wave of feminism, whose credo is the personal is political. And I think the stronger we become as individuals, the more we're able to lift up all other women or all other humans, and support one another. And it's interesting because I'm seeing a cycle. So the French Revolution, probably the most pivotal point of that was the Women's March on Versailles on October 5th and 6th of 1792. And thousands of women gathered at the square outside what's now the Olympe de Gouges. And they gathered and they marched out to Versailles, which is a 30-kilometer walk.
It's actually 13.
Oh, 13, okay.
Or 17, 13, 17, because I did a run from Paris to Versailles. So it's not that far. It's far, but I think it's 17. Yeah, 17 kilometers.
It's a half-an-hour train ride from the center of Paris out to Chateau Versailles. And these brave women were out there on a freezing cold, rainy day. They spent all night outside the palace gates, and they were demanding to speak to King Louis XVI, who, as we know, is very excessive in his spending and was married to Marie Antoinette. And they had just thrown this really lavish gala for the Swedish troops who the king brought in to protect himself and his family. And not only was that an affront to the French themselves, in terms of basically declaring himself as being, on the opposite side of the French people, but to give the Swedish guards this lavish banquet of food when they had no bread in Paris. They had huge droughts that really affected the crops, and these women were basically demanding more bread. So they finally were given a chance to speak to the king. They did have to, a few guards were murdered, they were decapitated and their heads were put on pikes and marched around. And there were three big wins for those women. And so one is they got the king to agree to release the stores of bread and grain, and they agreed to have the king sign the Declaration des droits des hommes et des citoyens, and which is something that the men in the National Assembly had been trying to achieve for quite some time. And lastly, they convinced the king and his family to move from their comfortable home in Chateau Versailles into the center of Paris, which we now know as the Louvre. It was known as the Tuileries Palace then, so that they would be accountable and they could be close to the people and sort of be at their beck and call. So,
thank you, Holly. Just to go back a bit on your works that you're using now to protest, a sign of what is happening now, what you call the Trump era. I don't know if everybody went to the back and saw the hashtag works. Can you talk to us more about these works and their relevance to today?
Okay, so we've got the hashtag Time's Up, hashtag MeToo, and hashtag I Believe Her. And just due to my own personal experiences, that movement, the Me Too movement, resonates really very strongly and personally with me. And perhaps this has opened up a time to express those sentiments, to have a voice, and to see more powerful women, such as celebrities in the States, bringing these issues to the forefront. And I think it's been a great thing for opening it up for other people like myself and hopefully all of you that feel an affinity with those causes. And I think when we get these turbulent times, cracks open up, and that's sort of your time to slip in and create change.
Thank you. So as we know, we all are sitting here, you're really interested in photography and you're exploring different ways of self-portraiture. And as well, today we live in a time where everybody has a camera and you can take a selfie of yourself. How do you respond to these actions of everybody being a photographer today and taking selfies? But how does that also link into your interest of technology in the Enlightenment era, the mirror, the camera, the action of taking a selfie?
So I was becoming a photographer right before the digital wave hit. I spent so much time in art school in the darkroom perfecting my trade processes and things like that. And I worked in a photo lab for a number of years, helping people learn digital processes from scanning to shooting and printing with digital cameras. So I've kind of gone through this big shift. And for a while I started to extend outside of photography, which my degree is in, and become more of an overall artist, hence the installation and text-based works, but also having everybody being a photographer, having a camera at their fingertips at every moment of every day, it makes me think about the photograph itself in a different way. How can I do something different with a photograph that goes beyond just seeing a JPEG online? A lot of my works are very difficult to photograph because of what I've done with them. I've become more hands-on in creating them. I've been doing a lot of cutting. There's some in the back using a process called paper toll, where I have 8 layers of C prints that build up sort of a 3-dimensional type of image. Doing things like placing mirrors where a mirror would normally be in a scene.
So you were also speaking about the presence of a mirror inside a camera, and how perhaps a camera, the French technology and also advancements of the also permitted this proliferation of cameras to today.
Good question. So in my studies at both Versailles and the history of photography, I became interested in the history of the mirror. And for any of you that have gone to the Venice Biennale, you might be familiar with a little island called Murano, just off of Venice. And Murano's really noted for its glass production. So it was there that they were creating plate glass. It's only about yay big back then because it was very fragile, it was difficult to produce, it was very expensive. And so we ended up getting a lot of things that you see, like French doors and windows where you've got these mullions in the center, to divide up the glass into different panels because they couldn't do larger pieces of glass. And it becomes a lot more interesting when they discovered that if you added silver to the back of the glass, you created a mirror or a mirror-like surface. All of a sudden you had a reflection and you could see yourself. And I thought that was so fascinating because I call this piece here The Origin of the Photographic Portrait. And that's one of my favorite pieces in the show because I think I have this theory that once people saw themselves reflected in a mirror, they would have probably likened it to painted portraits. Of course, we know only the wealthiest people would end up having their portraits painted. But it would have also brought about a sense of self-consciousness and awareness that people just didn't have back then. For the first time ever, we were able to see how we looked to other people. So I think that was really important for self-awareness. And if you walk past a piece like this or any mirror, it's kind of a given now, but back then I certainly would have eventually came across the idea, well, how do I stop myself there? How do I freeze and fix that image? And the term fix or fixer in photography, as you're making a print or developing a negative, there's a chemistry called fixer. That's to stop the process. And I think that seeing what's self-reflected would have been the impetus to create the photograph. And you were talking about one of our favorite French photographers, Louis de Gouges. So Louis de Gouges had, we know best for the invention of the daguerreotype, and that was sort of a very small photograph that was using chemistry and a polished copper plate that was sort of silvered, and creating the first photographs out of that. And
so that kind of source led you to this work that we can't see anymore. I don't know if maybe we're raising
Yes?
Yeah. So this work that we see projected that we'll see in a few minutes. It speaks directly to your experience in